It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday night. I had just finished setting up my new home gym in the basement, a project I'd been putting off for months. The kids were at a sleepover, Emma was upstairs, and I was cranking out a late-night workout, feeling good about myself for once. That's when I heard it. A laugh. Her laugh. But it wasn't her usual laugh. It wasn't the one she used when we were together as a family or when I cracked one of my dumb dad jokes. This was different, softer, lower, and unfamiliar in a way that made my stomach tighten. At first, I thought maybe she was watching TV. Emma was always into those over-the-top dramas where everyone cheats on everyone else. But when I paused the treadmill and listened closer, the sound wasn't coming from the living room. It was coming from the garage. Curiosity, or maybe instinct, got the better of me. I climbed the basement stairs quietly, careful not to let them creak, and made my way to the back door. It was open just a crack. That's when I saw the light. Not the warm, steady glow of the garage's ceiling bulb, but a flickering light, like candles. Why the hell would there be candles in the garage? I stepped closer, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't explain. The air felt different, thicker, charged. And then, through the small window on the garage door, I saw them. Emma and a man, standing way too close to each other, talking in hushed voices. She was holding something, a box? He reached out, took her hand, and leaned in as if to kiss her, but she pulled back, glancing toward the house. I froze, every nerve in my body screaming at me to move, to do something. But I couldn't. My mind raced with questions. Who was this guy? Why was he here, in my house, with my wife? And why did she look so damn guilty, like she knew what she was doing was wrong but wasn't ready to stop? The man handed her something small, a key, maybe, and whispered something I couldn't make out. Emma laughed again, that same laugh, and tucked the object into her pocket. Then, as if nothing strange had just happened, they stepped apart, and he disappeared out the side door into the night. I stood there in the dark, gripping the doorframe so tightly I thought it might splinter. When Emma came back inside, she didn't notice me. She walked upstairs, humming softly, while I stayed rooted to the spot, 100 different scenarios playing out in my head. None of them were good. Whatever was going on, it wasn't innocent. And I wasn't going to let it slide. The next morning, Emma was back to being her usual self, cheerful, organized, and busy with her endless to-do list. She kissed me on the cheek before heading out to work, leaving me standing in the kitchen with a half-empty coffee cup and 1,000 unanswered questions. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was harmless. Maybe I'd misinterpreted the whole thing. But deep down, I knew better. I couldn't concentrate on work. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face in the garage, her laugh, the way she pocketed whatever that guy had given her. It wasn't right. I didn't know what to do about it yet, but I was sure of one thing: I needed to know more before I acted. I started with the garage. After Emma left, I grabbed my coffee and walked out there under the pretense of looking for a tool. The space was clean and organized, the way she liked it, but something felt off. My eyes landed on the workbench in the corner. There was a small, unassuming box there, the kind we usually kept loose screws or nails in. I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a key, exactly what I'd seen her take last night. The paper was handwritten. The words were rushed, the letters slightly smudged, like someone had scribbled it down in a hurry. Same time next week. Use the key for the storage unit on Franklin. Don't call me. Only text. Be careful. M. My stomach twisted into knots. What the hell was this? A storage unit? A secret meeting? And who the hell was M? I stood there, staring at the note and the key like they might spontaneously offer more answers. My first instinct was to confront her right away, but I stopped myself. I'd learned over the years that Emma could be a master of deflection when she wanted to be. If I charged in now without knowing the full story, she'd turn it around, make me the bad guy for snooping. No, I needed to play it smarter than that. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on anything else. Work emails went unanswered, calls went straight to voicemail. My mind was consumed with the note, the key, and the man in the garage. By the time Emma came home that evening, I decided what I was going to do. Dinner was uneventful. The kids talked about their day at school, Emma smiled and laughed at all the right moments, and I sat there, pretending everything was normal. But my hands were clenched under the table, my appetite long gone. Every time I looked at her, I felt the weight of that note in my pocket. After the kids went to bed, Emma curled up on the couch with a glass of wine and her favorite reality show. I told her I was going out to meet a friend for drinks. She barely looked up, just waved me off with a distracted "have fun." I wasn't meeting anyone. I drove straight to the storage facility on Franklin. The place was dimly lit, rows of identical metal doors stretching out in both directions. I parked my car and walked up to Unit 237, the number scribbled on the note. My hands were shaking as I slid the key into the lock. It turned easily, and the door creaked open to reveal nothing. At first, it looked empty. The space was dark and bare, just cold concrete floors and walls. But then I saw the box. It was sitting in the far corner, small and plain, like something you'd use to pack up old photos or paperwork. I carried it over to the light spilling in from the hallway and opened it. Inside, there were stacks of envelopes, all addressed to Emma in the same rushed handwriting as the note. Beneath them was a smaller box. I opened that, and my heart stopped. It was full of cash. Tens, maybe hundreds of thousands, all neatly bound with rubber bands. My hands started sweating as I counted a few stacks. It was all real. And it wasn't just money, there was a flash drive tucked into the corner. I slipped it into my pocket and stared at the box in disbelief. What the hell was Emma mixed up in? I put everything back exactly the way I found it and locked the unit. Back in my car, I couldn't think straight. My wife had a secret storage unit filled with cash and letters from some mystery man. This wasn't just an affair. This was something else entirely. When I got home, Emma was already in bed, her phone charging on the nightstand. I sat in the living room for hours, trying to piece together the puzzle. The flash drive burned a hole in my pocket the whole time, but I was too afraid to look at it. Not yet. The next morning, Emma left early for a meeting, and I finally worked up the nerve to check the drive. I plugged it into my laptop, and my screen lit up with folders, dozens of them, all labeled with dates. I clicked on the most recent one, and my blood ran cold. It was a video. The man from the garage was sitting at a desk, speaking directly to the camera. "Emma, we're running out of time. If you can't get the money together by the end of the month, you know what will happen. I've already warned you once. Don't make me come to your house. Don't make this messy. Just do what I asked, and everything will be fine." The video ended, leaving me staring at the screen in stunned silence. What the hell had she gotten herself into? And why the hell hadn't she told me? The questions swirled in my mind, each one darker than the last. But one thing was clear, I couldn't ignore this. Not anymore. By Friday evening, the house was quiet. The kids were at a sleepover again, and Emma was upstairs folding laundry. I had spent all day pacing, preparing for what I was about to do. The flash drive sat on the coffee table in front of me, next to the note and the key I had taken from the garage. My heart pounded in my chest, but I knew I couldn't put this off any longer. I called up the stairs, keeping my voice calm. "Emma, can you come down for a second? We need to talk." "Sure," she called back. A moment later, she appeared at the top of the stairs, holding a stack of towels. She didn't look suspicious or defensive, just tired. "What's up?" "Just come down," I said. She hesitated, looking at me for a long moment before descending the stairs. I saw her eyes flicker to the coffee table as she walked into the living room. Her face didn't give anything away, but I noticed her hands tighten slightly on the towels. She set them down on the couch and stood there, waiting. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to sound casual. I picked up the flash drive and held it out to her. "Do you want to explain this?" Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't take it. "What is it?" "Don't play dumb, Emma. I found this in your storage unit." She froze. Just for a second. It was subtle, but I saw it. The tension in her shoulders, the way her mouth opened slightly as if she was about to speak but didn't know what to say. Then she folded her arms across her chest and glared at me. "You went through my stuff?" "You're damn right I did," I snapped. "Because I saw you in the garage with that guy the other night. I saw him hand you the key." "What the hell is going on, Emma? Who is he? And what are you hiding in that storage unit?" She sat down on the arm of the couch, avoiding my eyes. "I don't know what you think you saw, but you're wrong. It's not what it looks like." "Then explain it to me," I demanded. She let out a long sigh and ran a hand through her hair. "It's complicated. Try me." For a long moment, she didn't say anything. She just stared at the floor, her jaw tight. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place: anger, guilt, maybe both. "Fine," she said. "I owe someone money. That's what this is about." "What kind of money? Why is there cash in that storage unit? And who the hell is the guy in the video?" She hesitated again, and I felt my frustration boil over. "Emma, don't lie to me. Not anymore. You owe me the truth." Her voice was low when she finally spoke. "His name is Marcus. He's someone I used to know." "Used to know?" I repeated, my voice rising. "What does that mean?" She flinched slightly but held her ground. "We were involved. Before you and I got married. And now? Now he's a problem," she admitted. "He showed up a few months ago, out of nowhere, demanding money. He said he'd expose some things about me if I didn't pay him." "What kind of things?" I asked, my voice cold. She hesitated again, and I knew she was weighing whether to tell me the truth. "Things I did before we got together. Stupid things. Mistakes." I shook my head, trying to process what she was saying. "You're telling me you've been blackmailed for months, and you didn't think to tell me? You didn't think I might want to know why you've been sneaking around and lying to me?" "I didn't want to drag you into this," she said, her voice defensive now. "I thought I could handle it on my own." "Well, you clearly didn't handle it, did you?" I shot back. "Because now I'm involved whether you like it or not." She stood up suddenly, her arms still crossed. "What do you want from me, Jonathan? Do you want me to apologize?" "Fine. I'm sorry. But this isn't just about me. If he goes public with this, it could destroy everything: our family, my career, everything." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So your solution was to sneak around, hide money, and lie to my face?" She didn't answer, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. I stood there, staring at her, trying to decide what to do next. My anger was simmering just below the surface, but beneath that, there was something else: a deep, aching sense of betrayal. Finally, I spoke. "We're going to deal with this, but not on your terms. You've lost that privilege. If you want to salvage what's left of this marriage, you're going to tell me everything: no more lies, no more half-truths. Everything." She nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Okay. Good. Because if I find out you've been lying again, I'm done. Do you understand me, Emma? Done." She looked up at me then, her eyes filled with something that almost resembled fear. "I understand." "Then start talking." The days after Emma's confession were a whirlwind of tension and planning. I kept my distance from her as much as possible. Every word she had said felt like a slap in the face. She'd spent months lying to me, bringing a stranger's chaos into our home, all while expecting me to remain in the dark. My anger didn't burn hot, it smoldered, cold and calculating. Emma thought she'd dodged the worst. She'd given me her story. Marcus was a ghost from her past, someone she claimed to regret ever knowing. She swore she was done with him and promised she'd do whatever it took to fix things. But I wasn't interested in promises. I was interested in consequences. I'd always been the forgiving type. I let people make mistakes, let them figure things out. But not this time. Emma had destroyed the foundation of our marriage. The trust, the partnership, it was gone. And I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. The first step was to dig deeper. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. Emma might have told me the basics, but I wasn't going to take her word for it. I called in a favor from a friend of mine, Carl. He worked in private investigations, a job he loved and had helped me with once before when an old employer tried to screw me on a severance package. I gave Carl all the details I had: Marcus, the storage unit, the money, and the flash drive. He agreed to look into it discreetly, warning me it might take a few days to piece together the full picture. While Carl worked, I started preparing my own retaliation. If Emma thought I'd simply sit around waiting for her to fix things, she was dead wrong. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about me taking back control of a situation she'd ripped from my hands. I wanted her to feel the weight of every choice she'd made. First, I called my lawyer. Not for divorce, not yet, but to prepare. I wanted to know where I stood if this went nuclear. I had questions about our finances, custody arrangements, and how much leverage I had with the evidence I'd gathered. The lawyer, an efficient woman named Diane, didn't sugarcoat anything. If you've got proof she's been dishonest and endangering the family's financial security, you're in a strong position, Diane said. But don't make any rash moves. Document everything, and don't confront her again without a plan. That advice stuck with me. I wasn't going to lash out. I wasn't going to let my emotions control me. I was going to be methodical. The next step was financial. Emma had her own account, separate from our shared one, and I knew she used it for personal expenses. I started reviewing the transactions from our joint account, looking for anything that could tie her spending to Marcus or the storage unit. It didn't take long to find a few suspicious withdrawals, cash transactions that lined up with the dates on the envelopes in the storage unit. I noted everything, printing out statements and highlighting anything that looked questionable. Then, I got bold. One afternoon while Emma was at work, I packed up the flash drive and the financial records I'd gathered and drove to her office. It was a gamble, showing up unannounced, but I wasn't there to make a scene. I was there to leave her a message. At the front desk, I handed the receptionist a sealed envelope addressed to Emma. Inside was a USB stick containing the video from Marcus, a list of the cash withdrawals, and a note. I know more than you think. Fix this, or I will. I left before Emma could come downstairs. By the time she got home that evening, I was already at the dinner table with the kids, pretending like everything was fine. She looked pale, her eyes darting toward me nervously as she hung up her coat. I didn't say anything. I just smiled at her, the same way she'd smiled at me all those months she'd been lying. Let her feel the weight of uncertainty for once. That night, Carl called me back with his findings. His voice was grim. This Marcus guy? He's bad news, Carl said. He's been in and out of prison for fraud, theft, and extortion. Looks like he's used the same blackmail scheme on at least 2 other women. Both ended up filing police reports when he wouldn't leave them alone. My grip tightened on the phone. What about Emma? How deep is she in with him? That's the thing, Carl said. I think she's his fallback plan. From what I can tell, she's been funneling him cash to keep him quiet, but he's not getting as much as he wants. He's probably waiting for the right moment to up the pressure. Is there anything we can do to stop him? I asked. Carl hesitated. You could go to the cops, but without Emma's cooperation, it's tricky. They'd need her to press charges. If she's still scared of him, she might not be willing to go that far. I hung up, feeling a mix of frustration and resolve. Marcus wasn't just a threat to Emma, he was a threat to my family. And if she wasn't going to deal with him, I would. The next day, I made another move. I reached out to Emma's parents, who lived a few towns over. We didn't talk often, but they adored the kids and had always been supportive of our marriage. I didn't give them the full story, just enough to let them know things weren't as perfect as they seemed. I hinted that Emma had been keeping secrets and that I needed their support if things took a turn. They were shocked, but they promised to stand by me if it came to that. Meanwhile, Emma was unraveling. She stayed late at work more often, her phone glued to her hand at all hours. I caught her pacing in the backyard one night, talking in hushed tones to someone I could only assume was Marcus. She didn't realize I was watching from the window, recording every word with my phone. The final piece of my plan fell into place a week later. Carl had managed to track down Marcus's last known address, a rundown apartment complex across town. I drove there late one night, armed with the evidence I'd gathered and the knowledge that Marcus was on thin ice. My intention wasn't to confront him directly, I wasn't that reckless. But I wanted him to know I wasn't afraid to play dirty if he didn't back off. I left a package outside his door, sealed with a note. "You've taken enough. Walk away, or I'll make sure you can't run this game again." The package contained copies of the video, Emma's financial records, and Carl's research into Marcus's criminal history. I didn't stick around to see his reaction, but I felt a cold satisfaction as I drove away. Back at home, Emma was asleep in bed, oblivious to the storm brewing around her. I lay down next to her, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long it would take for everything to come crashing down. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about survival. It took another week before the house of cards fell. Emma had been tense and distracted, her behavior more erratic than ever. She avoided me when we were alone and barely looked me in the eye during dinner with the kids. I could tell she was unraveling, but she wasn't ready to come clean. Not yet. I wasn't waiting anymore. That Friday night, after the kids were asleep, I asked Emma to join me in the living room. She hesitated, standing at the bottom of the stairs like a deer caught in headlights. Finally, she nodded and followed me. I sat on the couch and gestured for her to sit across from me. She perched on the edge of the armchair, her hands fidgeting nervously. I let the silence stretch between us, watching her squirm. She'd had weeks to come clean, and she hadn't. Now, I was going to force her hand. "We need to talk," I said finally. She swallowed hard. "About what?" "Don't play dumb, Emma. You know exactly what this is about." Her eyes darted toward the door, as if she were considering making a run for it. Instead, she sat back and crossed her arms, trying to look defiant. "Fine. Say whatever you need to say." I pulled out the flash drive and set it on the coffee table between us. "I know everything. The money. Marcus. The threats. I've been sitting on this for weeks, waiting for you to tell me the truth. But you haven't." Her face turned pale, and for a moment, I thought she might pass out. She leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of the chair. "How much do you know?" "Enough," I said. "Enough to know you've been lying to me for months. Enough to know you've put this family in danger." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel sorry for her. "Not this time. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I demanded. "Do you have any idea how much damage you've caused?" "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said, her voice shaking. "I was trying to protect you and the kids." "Protect us?" I snapped. "By lying to me? By sneaking around and funneling money to some lowlife criminal? You weren't protecting us, Emma. You were protecting yourself." She flinched at my words, but I didn't stop. "You made this mess, and now you expect me to clean it up. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is? To find out my wife has been keeping secrets from me, dealing with a blackmailer behind my back? You didn't just betray me, Emma. You betrayed our family." The tears were streaming down her face now, but I didn't care. I'd carried this weight for too long. It was her turn. "I didn't know what else to do," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "When Marcus showed up, I panicked. I thought I could handle it on my own. I didn't want to drag you into it." "You didn't want to drag me into it?" I repeated. "Emma, this is my life too. These are my kids. You don't get to make those decisions without me." She covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly. I sat back, my anger simmering just below the surface. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. Finally, she looked up at me, her face red and blotchy. I'm sorry, she said. I know I screwed up. I know I should have told you sooner. But I didn't know how. I didn't want you to hate me. I laughed bitterly. Hate you? Emma, I don't even know who you are anymore. The woman I married would have come to me. She would have trusted me to help her. But you? You're a stranger. Her sobs turned into hiccups, and she shook her head. I never meant to hurt you. I love you, Jonathan. I love our family. Do you? I asked coldly. Because it doesn't feel like it. It feels like you love yourself more than anyone else. She didn't respond, and I stood up, pacing the room. My thoughts were racing, the weight of everything crushing me. I'd spent weeks gathering evidence, preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, I didn't know what to do. I don't know if I can forgive you for this, I said finally. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. Please, Jonathan. Don't say that. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, work on our marriage. Please, just give me another chance. I gave you a chance, I said, my voice hard. I gave you weeks to come clean, and you didn't. You chose to keep lying. You chose to keep sneaking around. That's not a mistake, Emma. That's a choice. She stood up, crossing the room to stand in front of me. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right, she said, her voice desperate. Just tell me what I need to do. I stared at her, trying to see the woman I'd fallen in love with. But all I saw was a liar. A coward. You want to make this right? I asked. Then tell the kids. Tell them what you did. Tell them why our family is falling apart. Her face crumpled, and she shook her head. No. Please, don't make me do that. Why not? I demanded. Because it's easier to let me be the bad guy? Because you don't want them to see who you really are? She didn't answer, and I laughed bitterly. That's what I thought, I said. You don't care about fixing this. You care about saving face. Her sobs grew louder, and she sank to the floor, her hands covering her face. I stood over her, my heart pounding. I'll tell you what, Emma, I said. I'll give you one last chance to make this right. You go to Marcus. You end this. You give him whatever he wants, and you get him out of our lives for good. And if you can't do that, I'm done. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. I'll do it, she said. I'll fix this. I promise. Good, I said. Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows the truth. Your parents. Your friends. The kids. Everyone. She nodded, her sobs quieting. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her there on the floor. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I felt a strange sense of relief. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had control. Emma's promise to fix it wasn't worth much to me. I'd heard enough empty words to last a lifetime, and I was done relying on her to clean up her mess. The days following our confrontation were tense. She moved through the house like a shadow, avoiding me when she could and throwing herself into mundane tasks like reorganizing the pantry or scrubbing the bathroom tiles as if she could erase her guilt with elbow grease. The kids noticed, of course. They weren't stupid. They asked why Mom seemed upset, and I told them it was grown-up stuff. They didn't push further, but their worried expressions were enough to twist the knife Emma had already plunged into me. I wasn't just sitting idly by, waiting to see if Emma would actually follow through. My patience had run out, and I was determined to secure my own future. That meant ensuring I'd come out of this mess with as much stability and leverage as possible. I spent hours with Diane, my lawyer, going over every financial detail, every contingency. I wanted to make sure that if this fell apart, and I was nearly certain it would, I'd be the one to walk away with the upper hand. Your best move right now is to keep the status quo, Diane said. Don't escalate things until you're ready to act. Keep gathering information, and don't let her know what you're planning. I agreed, but keeping the status quo was easier said than done. Every interaction with Emma was a reminder of how far we'd fallen. Every time I saw her with the kids, laughing at something they said or kissing them goodnight, I felt an overwhelming mix of anger and sadness. She was still their mother, still the woman I'd once loved, but she wasn't the same person anymore. And I wasn't sure if I could ever look at her without seeing the lies and betrayal. About a week after our confrontation, I got a call from Carl. He'd dug up even more dirt on Marcus, and it wasn't pretty. "This guy's bad news, Jonathan," Carl said. "He's been running this same blackmail scheme for years, but it's not just about money. He's violent. There's a restraining order against him in another state, and one of his previous victims ended up in the hospital after trying to cut ties." My stomach churned. "Does Emma know about this?" "Hard to say," Carl replied. "But if she doesn't, she needs to. This guy's not going to back off until he gets what he wants, and even then, he might not stop." I thanked Carl and hung up, my mind racing. Marcus wasn't just a threat to Emma, he was a threat to all of us. I couldn't wait for her to deal with him anymore. It was time for me to take control. That night, after the kids were asleep, I confronted Emma again. This time, I didn't pull any punches. "I talked to someone about Marcus," I said, watching her face carefully. "He's dangerous, Emma. Did you know that?" She looked away, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I didn't think it would go this far," she admitted. "I thought if I gave him what he wanted, he'd leave me alone." "Well, he hasn't, has he?" I snapped. "And now he's not just your problem. He's our problem. You brought this into our home, Emma. You put all of us at risk." "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know what else to do." "You should have come to me," I said, my voice cold. "But you didn't. And now I have to clean up your mess." She looked at me, panic flashing in her eyes. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to deal with him," I said. "And you're going to stay out of it?" "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "Jonathan, you can't. He's dangerous. You don't know what he's capable of." "Maybe not," I said. "But I'm not going to sit back and let him keep controlling you or us. This ends now." Before she could argue further, I walked out of the room. I didn't tell her what I planned to do, and I didn't need her approval. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about protecting my family and reclaiming my life. The next day, I met with Carl in person. We reviewed everything he'd uncovered about Marcus, his criminal history, his known associates, his methods. Carl had even managed to find a phone number and a current address. It was risky, but I decided to confront Marcus directly. Not alone, of course, Carl would be nearby, and I had a recording device hidden on me in case things went south. When I arrived at Marcus's apartment, I felt a surge of adrenaline. The building was run down, the kind of place where no one asked questions. I knocked on his door, my heart pounding. After a moment, the door opened, and there he was. He was shorter than I'd expected, but his eyes were sharp and calculating. "Who the hell are you?" he asked, his tone suspicious. "I'm Emma's husband," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We need to talk." For a moment, I thought he might slam the door in my face. But then he smirked and stepped aside. "Come on in." The apartment was as dingy as the building, cluttered with fast food wrappers and empty beer bottles. Marcus gestured for me to sit, but I stayed standing. "Let's get to the point," I said. "You're going to leave my wife alone. No more calls, no more texts, no more threats. You're done." He laughed, a low, mocking sound. "And what makes you think I'll do that?" I leaned forward, keeping my voice calm but firm. "Because if you don't, I'll make sure you regret it. I've got everything I need to expose you, your criminal history, your scams, everything. If you come near her or my family again, I'll take it all to the police. And I don't think you want that." His smirk faltered for a moment, but he recovered quickly. "You think you're the first husband to threaten me? I've heard it all before, pal. You don't scare me." "Maybe not," I said. "But I'm not bluffing. Walk away now, and this all goes away. Push me, and I'll make your life hell. For a long moment, we stared each other down. Finally, he shrugged. Fine. She's not worth the trouble anyway. I didn't trust him, but it was a start. I left the apartment and called Carl to let him know it was done. For now, at least. When I got home, Emma was waiting for me, her face pale and drawn. Did you see him? She asked. I handled it, I said. But don't think this is over. We're not just going to sweep this under the rug, Emma. There's a lot we need to work through, and I don't know if we'll come out the other side. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'll do whatever it takes, she said. But I wasn't sure if I believed her.